This is Part 2, Episode 132. The leading Soul engineer was shocked. It was pertinent to note that each of the metal pillars weighed more than 5,000 kilos. Was that a weight that a human could lift? Even if they were hit by only the edge of this metal pillar, it would still be enough to crush them. Disperse. The 10 Soul engineers quickly dispersed, which prevented them from being killed. However, that person didn't seem to care whether he hit them. In his hands, the pillar seemed to be very light and free. Then, he forcefully smashed the pillar against a huge rack at his side. The rack was greatly damaged before it started to collapse. A huge drill that was attached to it slanted, and was about to fall off. The price of such a drill was around 1 million gold soul coins. Is he really a human? This was the thought in all of the Soul engineers' heads right now. Even Juzi was stunned when she saw this. Can a human really be so strong? At this point, that person turned around. He grabbed the metal pillar tightly with both hands before he started to spin around. He looked like a giant spinning top, while the metal pillar was like the sharp point of this spinning top. It was extremely terrifying. This was definitely more terrifying than the blizzard earlier. The surrounding structures were all destroyed as this metal windstorm swept by. Juzi could no longer remain composed anymore. She shouted, "Large teams 1 and 2, enter the formation and attack with heavy cannons. Teams 3 and 4, prepare to maintain the linked defensive barrier." The Soul formation of the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion was in the center of the base. This was the plan all along. All the large Soul tools were contained within this formation. There were even several Class 9 Soul tools there. From this brief encounter, she had already concluded that this extremely powerful man had to be at least a transcendent Dolor. Fighting a transcendent Dolor was not something 1 or 2 people could do. As she recalled the blizzard earlier, she realized that the enemy's strength couldn't be estimated at all. The only way they could deal with their attacks was to use their linked defense in tandem with their Soul formation. Without a doubt, it was right of her to do this. However, it was at this moment that the Fire Phoenix Dolor was stunned. She peered into the sky and asked, "Legion Commander, take a look." "What's that?" Juzi subconsciously lifted her head to take a look, and was stunned. A ball of icy blue light was becoming brighter and brighter in the sky. This ball of light seemed to have covered the entire sky, as if the moon had suddenly fallen from the heavens. It was crashing down on them. The aura of this ball of light was so overwhelming that they felt as if they were being completely suppressed just by looking at it. "It's too scary." "What is it?" "Quick, let's gather our full strength and attack the sky." Juzi gave out an order without any further hesitation. She also quickly went to retrieve soul cannons and fired them towards the sky. At this moment, a loud boom caused Juzi's body to shake slightly. The entire linked defense formation started to waver. Many of the Soul engineers didn't even hear her orders clearly. Although 200 Soul engineers had left for the Soul formation, there were still 300 Soul engineers maintaining this linked defense formation. But it still shook tremendously. This showed how powerful the enemy's attack was. Juzi turned, and all she saw was a huge metal pillar being deflected away. She suddenly understood what was going on. The person who had unleashed the metal windstorm earlier had thrown the metal pillar towards them. The metal pillar was almost 50 meters long, and it was unleashed with great force because of the high-speed rotation earlier. No wonder the impact force was so terrifying. Even though they were protected, some of the Class 4 Soul engineers turned pale. Some of them were even hurt, and spat out blood. This momentary delay allowed the huge icy blue ball to get closer and closer. It was as if a giant mountain were going to crash down on them. At this moment, the teams that were supposed to enter the Soul formation had yet to get into position. "Attack! Quick, attack towards the sky! Don't bother with that person below!" Juzi shouted. Her Soul cannon had already been fired. Although she didn't know what that huge light ball was, she could clearly sense that the entire Soul formation would be destroyed if it was allowed to crash down. At this moment, ordinary soldiers were completely useless. Even as the commander of the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion, she also felt helpless. The Fire Phoenix Dolor had remained close to Juzi, and she now lifted her hands. As a light flashed, she retrieved a golden red object from her storage-type soul tool. It was a weird soul tool in the shape of a phoenix. This soul tool wasn't very large. However, it exuded scorching heat the moment it appeared. The golden red light that emanated from it also brightened their surroundings. This fire phoenix was very exquisite. Its eyes were like rubies, and looked very real. It felt as if it were a real phoenix. The Fire Phoenix Dolor wore a serious expression on her face as she slowly lifted it up. Following this, her figure flashed, and she exited the linked defense formation. Intense fiery red light was released from her body as her soul rings appeared. Her fiery wings were unleashed, and the fiery light started to gather towards the soul tool in her hands. The Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion demonstrated its strength at this moment. The 300 Soul Engineers in the sky quickly unleashed their attacks under Juzi's command. 300 beams of fiery red light shot out. They gathered in the air and charged straight towards the ball of light. Since they could link their defenses, they could naturally link their attacks too. This was why the Sun Moon Empire was so scary. Loud booms resonated through the air. The huge icy blue ball shook slightly, but started to shine even more brightly. It continued to crash down, although it was slightly slower now. The ladies from the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion were shocked when they saw this scene. Their linked offensive soul tools were known for being unstoppable. There were a few hundred of them. Even though they were just using class for scorching rays, their combined attack was still very powerful. Of course, the low temperature of the ice plains of the extreme north slightly diminished the effect of these scorching rays. However, what exactly was that falling light? How was it able to resist the rays? It was completely unbelievable. Juzi was a little similar to Huiyu Hao. In a crisis, she was able to maintain her composure. She knew that she had to stop the ball from falling. It had to be very strong if it could resist so many scorching rays. Once it crashed down, their soul formation was bound to be destroyed. If she could hang on until their soul formation took effect, they wouldn't need to fear anymore. A Soul Engineer Legion was most terrifying in the soul formation that it created. However, giant snowballs started to be rapidly flung over from the perimeter of the base at this moment. Wherever they passed, all the mining machines were quickly destroyed. The burly man who flung the metal pillar earlier also looked into the sky and roared. His body started to balloon in size. In just a matter of seconds, Juzi watched him grow to a height of more than 120 meters. The Titan Snow Devil King had a reputation for having the strongest body in the continent, and he didn't earn it from nothing. Soul Masters and Soul Engineers weren't unfamiliar with soul beasts. However, this was the first time the Soul Engineers from the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion had seen such a massive soul beast. The Titan Snow Devil King roared into the sky and crouched down slightly before leaping up. His huge figure was like a cannon shell as he collided with the linked defensive barrier in the sky. At the same time, the giant snowballs were already hitting them from all directions now. Boom! The linked defensive barrier shook tremendously, and all the soul engineers within it turned extremely pale. The Fire Phoenix Dolor was also stunned for a moment. She was also slightly delayed from firing her soul tool. The Fire Phoenix Dolor could tell how strong the Titan Snow Devil King was the moment he revealed his true size. She wasn't a pure soul master, but she had some understanding of soul beasts. If he could transform into a human, he had to be a savage beast. He's definitely a soul beast. This is not a martial soul true body unleashed by a soul master. A martial soul true body is an energy body, but this is definitely his true form. There was one savage beast to their side, and there was a ball of terrifying light descending from above. Which one should they choose to resist? Sky. Juzi made the decision for the Fire Phoenix Dolor. At this moment, she tried to calm herself as she faced the immense Titan Snow Devil King. The aerial threat directly threatened the soul formation below. Although the Titan Snow Devil King was strong, the soul formation could still resist him if it was deployed perfectly. As one of the strongest soul engineer legions of the Sun Moon Empire, Juzi was confident that they could deal with any problems that arose once they unleashed their full fighting strength. The fire phoenix Doluor shouted and exerted strength with both hands as she pushed up. As a sonorous phoenix roar sounded, a fire phoenix was actually released from her hands. It fluttered its phoenix wings and flew towards the plummeting ball of light. This was a powerful Class 9 soul tool that the fire phoenix Doluor had personally created. It was called Soaring Phoenix and was a pure offensive soul tool. It could reach a temperature of over 1,000 degrees Celsius and possessed great explosive strength. It could only be used once before it became useless, but it was much more powerful than most ordinary Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells. However, its shortcoming was that it couldn't reach as far as a stationary soul cannon shell. However, it was very suitable for usage within a fixed region. The Titan Snow Devil King was slightly stunned when he saw the fire phoenix rising into the sky. Although it wasn't flying towards him, he could still sense the immense soul power undulations it emitted. Can a human really unleash such an attack? That human isn't that strong either. Hui Yuhao mentioned that humans are capable of inventing weapons. This must be one of them. It's indeed strong. Originally, the Titan Snow Devil King had looked down on humans. However, his opinion slowly changed when he realized that his previous two attacks couldn't topple the linked defensive barrier, and after he saw the rising fire phoenix. The huge ball in the sky was only 500 meters from the ground now. At this moment, the soaring phoenix blew apart and received its attack. Blue and fiery red formed two parallel lines in the air. These parallel lines expanded suddenly, and a region covering hundreds of square kilometers was instantly engulfed by these two colors. Ice and fire raged as they battled with each other. It was also at this moment that the Soul Engineers of the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion finally entered their soul formation, and started to control their large offensive soul tools. Between ice and fire, fire was evidently being drained more quickly. After all, this was the ice plains of the extreme north. In this extremely cold part of the world, all fire-type abilities were greatly diminished. This process was even continuous. It was at this moment that a ball of icy blue light suddenly drilled out from the fire and instantly crashed down, landing directly within the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion soul formation. When it hit the ground, the light dispersed, revealing a figure. Wasn't he Hui Yuhao? When Hui Yuhao landed, his body immediately turned illusory. The huge figure that had descended from the sky earlier was naturally the Ice Bear King. Hui Yuhao had already guessed that the Phoenix Soul Engineer would have some way of tackling him, given their abilities. At the same time, he was also adapting to the situation. Everything, including the Titan Snow Devil King and the Titan Snow Devil's attacks, was under his control. A white halo immediately spread after he concealed his body with his imitation. At the same time, a golden whirlpool appeared above the Fire Phoenix Doluor's head. They were his third and fourth soul skills, mass enfeeblement and spiritual confusion. In terms of cultivation, Hui Yuhao couldn't compare to the Fire Phoenix Doluor. However, his immense spiritual power could compare to a titled Doluor. Under the effect of his spiritual soul core, he unleashed two soul skills. Suddenly, the Fire Phoenix Doluor was sent into a momentary trance. Within this soul formation, all the soul engineers felt as if their soul power had leaked out of their bodies. A strong sense of weakness quickly caused them to turn dizzy. After Hui Yuhao's mass enfeeblement, a huge vertical eye appeared at the center of the soul formation, and the space within the soul formation immediately distorted. Clearly no sound was made, but every soul engineer felt as if deafening thunder had sounded in their ears. Hui Yuhao unleashed his martial soul true body, the demonic eyes of the Azura, along with his spiritual blast. A few spiritual-type soul skills were unleashed simultaneously. All the soul engineers from the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion staggered after being hit by Hui Yuhao's spiritual blast. Hui Yuhao didn't unleash the full power of his spiritual blast because he wanted to maximize the area it covered. Otherwise, some of the soul engineers who were closest to him would have been blown apart from the blast. Hui Yuhao stomped the ground with his right foot before the star anise mysterious ice grass surfaced above his head. Following this, the ground shook, and countless ice spikes formed a dazzling icy flower with Hui Yuhao's body at the center. It was the star anise omnithrust. Under the enhancement of the star anise mysterious ice grass, the star anise omnithrust was unleashed with full force. The Soul Engineers all had automated protective barriers on their bodies. They were only flung away from the star anise omnithrust, but the Soul formation that was deployed wasn't protected by a defensive barrier. Or rather, without any Soul Engineers controlling it, there was no way the Soul formation could be protected. The Soul tools in this formation were rather tough. Even when hit by the star anise omnithrust, only small parts of them were damaged. However, they were all knocked over by the impact. Huiyuhao's series of attacks didn't cause too much harm to the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion. However, it caused the Soul formation to be completely suppressed. When Juzi saw that huge vertical eye, she already knew who was here. Huiyuhao was simply too quick. After he unleashed his spiritual blast, he returned to his original form almost instantly. When he stomped with his right leg, he was just looking at her. After this, countless ice spikes were unleashed. Around the perimeter, several massive figures changed into their original forms after a series of collisions. The powerful Titan Snow Devils had already charged into the base with the help of the Blizzard and Huiyuhao. Huiyuhao stood arrogantly in the center of the Soul formation. When Juzi finally gritted her teeth and gave the order to all the Soul Engineers to focus their attacks on Huiyuhao, another huge figure fell from the sky, shielding him. A giant ice wall absorbed all the attacks. At this moment, these Soul Engineers couldn't even think about attacking Huiyuhao without their Soul tools. Huiyuhao remained where he was. On his forehead, his Eye of Destiny had already opened. Sunray patterns filled his forehead. Right now, he was at the center of the battlefield. Whether it was the Ice Bear King, the Titan Snow Devil King or the Titan Snow Devils, they were all within range of his spiritual detection sharing. The entire battlefield had been completely engulfed by his spiritual detection. Every Titan Snow Devil was under his command, including the Titan Snow Devil King. The Titan Snow Devils didn't kill the ordinary soldiers. Instead, they were furiously destroying all the structures. All the facilities that the Sun Moon Empire had tirelessly built to mine rare metals were torn apart under the hands of these Titan Snow Devils. Metal pieces were flying everywhere. It took the Soul Engineers in the Soul formation some effort before they shook off the effects of Huiyuhao's mass enfeeblement, spiritual blast and star anise omnithrust. By then, they discovered that they couldn't do anything at all. The Ice Bear King released a strong, chilly aura from his body as he stood within the Soul formation. All the Soul tools were quickly being frozen. Huiyuhao was already showing mercy. After all, the Soul Engineers in the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion were female. If he had followed his attacks up with his ice explosion technique, those who were of lower cultivations would have been critically hurt. However, he didn't want to kill too many people, which stopped him from doing that. All the Soul tools were just frozen under the control of the Ice Bear King. The Soul Engineers could only quickly flee in all directions. They were all scattered from one another. Even if they could attack, how could they possibly threaten the Ice Bear King? Juzi turned slightly pale. When Huiyuhao led the Ice Bear King to occupy the Soul formation, she knew that she had already lost this battle. Without the Soul formation, she couldn't possibly threaten the Titan Snow Devils even if she could survive. These Titan Snow Devils were simply too scary. Class 4 and 5 Soul tools were ineffective against them. Their destructive abilities had even destroyed all the mining facilities in and around the base. These Titan Snow Devils had massive limbs and sharp claws. Even the tough metals seemed like paper in front of them. Right now, more than 100 Titan Snow Devils were gathering towards the center. The Titan Snow Devil King had even grabbed another thick metal pillar and smashed it against the linked defensive formation in the air. Juzi gritted her teeth and couldn't help but think, this fellow is heartless. I've been worrying over him for so long, but he's brought me such a huge surprise with his return. Huiyuhao naturally didn't know what Juzi was thinking about. Things had reached such a stage that the Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion was clearly unable to clean up the mess anymore. Huiyuhao flipped up and jumped onto the Ice Bear King's back. The Ice Bear King roared into the sky. Countless ice picks danced in the air and shot straight towards the linked defensive formation. The Ice Bear King turned around quickly and charged away with Hui Yuhao on his back. He's leaving? He's leaving just like that? Ju Zi was stunned. When she saw the frozen soul formation on the ground, she heaved a sigh of relief. Although they had suffered heavy losses this time, they had still managed to preserve their soul formation. This meant that she still had a chance of making a comeback. However, this thought only lasted for a second before she was brought back to the harsh realities of life. Tremendous booms started resonating through the air. Explosions sounded from the soul formation one after another. The huge soul tools were blown apart, and debris scattered in the air. Bits of metal flew everywhere, and the core formation blew apart, causing an even louder explosion. The entire soul formation seemed as if it had been ignited as it kept on exploding. Ice explosion technique. The ferocious ice explosion technique caused everything below to turn into an ocean of ice. The charging Ice Bear King released icy blue halos from his body as he charged away. The ice elements in the air were instantly turned into another blizzard that swept over the entire place. Everything became unclear again. The blizzard caused heaven and earth to darken. Ju Zi didn't give the order to attack anymore. She gathered all her soul engineers and commanded them to maintain their linked defense. This time, the blizzard didn't last as long as before. By the time blizzard was about to end, the Titan Snow Devils, Ice Bear King and Hui Yuhao had already completely vanished. The chilly winds in the extreme north continued to whiz, but the explosions had already ceased. Things turned peaceful once again. Due to the blizzard, the ground was already covered in white. Even at night, the silky white snow still refracted some light. At this moment, a deep voice sounded, "This is your last warning. Humans, leave the extreme north. This is not a place you should be. If there's a next time, we won't be merciful. All life will be turned into ice and snow." This voice came with the winds, and echoed throughout the camp. It was deafening. It sounded as if the heavens had raged. This was. Not all the soul engineers had seen the human figure that had appeared in their midst. After all, Hui Yuhao had unleashed his imitation to conceal himself right from the start. At this moment, all the soul engineers turned pale when they heard this voice. This was only a warning. It was a warning from the ice plains of the extreme north. Every empire had a limited understanding of the world of soul beasts in the extreme north. This was because the soul beasts here were only helpful to ice-type soul masters. Almost no soul master would come here to get a soul ring. Under such a circumstance, their understanding of the ice plains of the extreme north was extremely limited. The giants that were more than 100 meters tall, and the terrifying giant bear that appeared earlier left deep impressions in the minds of these soul engineers. As the hand that protects the nation in the Sun Moon Empire, they were actually very confident in themselves. Their confidence even bordered on arrogance. This was their first time suffering such a heavy setback ever since they were established. Even though there weren't many casualties, they had still suffered massive losses. Almost all the aerial surveillance soul tools were destroyed. The soul formation below had also suffered the same fate. After tirelessly building these facilities for half a month, almost nothing was left. A large number of tents had been destroyed, and thousands of soldiers were left shivering in the cold. Was this how powerful the ice plains of the extreme north were? What kind of strength existed here? Did they incur the wrath of this place by trying to mine rare metals here? The soul engineers weren't the only ones who heard the voice. The ordinary soldiers heard it too. Compared to the soul engineers, the ordinary soldiers were more afraid of gods. Adding that to the fact that it was bitingly cold right now, the soldiers' morale was greatly affected. Ju Zi quietly drifted in mid-air. The others didn't know, but how could she not be aware? Even though she only got a glance before Hui Yuhao had concealed himself, she could already tell that what she saw was right. It was him. It had to be his abilities. Even though he was much stronger now compared to before, his martial soul true body was unique. It's him. He didn't just bring reinforcements from Shrek Academy, he brought many soul beasts from the ice plains of the extreme north too. No matter how intelligent Ju Zi was, she couldn't understand why the soul beasts would listen to Hui Yuhao. Furthermore, the battle earlier didn't seem to have been initiated by the soul beasts. It had to be a scheme, a ploy. Not many had died, but all the soul tools had been destroyed. Furthermore, they didn't manage to cause many problems for the enemy. This was clearly an ambush led by someone. At this moment, Juzi couldn't consider so many things anymore. She gritted her teeth and groaned furiously, then immediately gave out a series of orders. First, the soldiers whose tents had been destroyed needed to be helped. They would be temporarily moved to the tents that had been protected by the linked defensive formation. Even if it was overcrowded, they had no choice anymore. Furthermore, she instructed all the soul engineers to let out their tents to the soldiers who were injured. The Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion was well equipped. Every soul engineer had her own tent. Even though their individual tents weren't very large, they were still sufficient to accommodate a few people. In addition, tents made from mature cow leather were much warmer than ordinary tents. They were very appropriate for accommodating casualties. At the same time, the fire-type abilities of the soul engineers also become the best way to help the soldiers keep warm. The entire base started to get busy. Even though morale was low, the soldiers became less affected by daylight because Juzi handled the situation very well. It was important to know that she had even let out her own tent for the injured soldiers. This act won the hearts of her soldiers and stopped their morale from falling even further. When things had finally been settled, the sky was already brightening. When Juzi saw all the damaged soul tools, she was on the verge of crying, even though she was normally very tough. Not only had they lost this battle, they had lost tragically too. Although there weren't many casualties, they had suffered major losses in terms of their machines. Hoi Yuhao, you too ruthless. Juzi gritted her teeth as she thought. However, her expression slowly turned gentler as she recalled what had happened in the fight. How could she not tell that Hoi Yuhao was actually being merciful? Otherwise, those powerful soul beasts would have had many opportunities to launch a massacre. If that had happened, more than half of the ordinary soldiers would have been killed, and even the soul engineers within the soul formation would not have survived. When the soul formation was destroyed, Hoi Yuhao and the terrifying soul beasts had a ripe opportunities to encircle and kill them. But Hoi Yuhao didn't do so. He didn't let the powerful soul beasts do that. Instead, he engaged purely in destruction. After gaining the absolute advantage, he decided to retreat. Juzi knew that they had their linked soul tools as a guarantee, and could kill some of the giant soul beasts. However, what was the point of killing only one or two of them? Those giants were too terrifying. Their defensive strength was the strongest among all the soul beasts that she had ever seen. The price to pay to kill even one of them would have been very high. What if they drained all their soul power and couldn't maintain their linked defensive barrier anymore? They could only flee. But what would be the result of fleeing? It was leaving behind a 25,000-man army. The Soul Engineer Legion might be able to flee, but the ordinary soldiers wouldn't be able to do so. When she thought until here, Juzi felt less aggrieved. Her nemesis was ultimately her own lack of knowledge. She had lost this round, and she had lost it badly. HMPH. You better not land in my hands. Juzi thought to herself fiercely. Her face started to show a tinge of red. This was because she found out that even she felt helpless when she thought of this. Hoi Yuhao led the Titan Snow Devils as they retreated. They returned to their temporary base 50 kilometers away. However, they hadn't won effortlessly like Juzi thought. There was a huge burn covering more than 10 square meters on the Ice Bear King's chest. He was pretty hurt. The Fire Phoenix Doluo's Soaring Phoenix was very strong. It was much stronger than Hoi Yuhao had expected. The Ice Bear King had used his Ice Bear Meteor, his strongest offensive soul skill. However, he was still hurt after colliding with the Soaring Phoenix after he was weakened by the linked offensive soul tools. The Titan Snow Devil King had already turned back into his human form and stood beside Hoi Yuhao. The Ice Bear King did the same. However, he was seated instead. He grimaced as he circulated his soul power to treat his wound. The Titan Snow Devil King sighed and said, "I didn't believe that humans could invent weapons to deal with us. But it seems like I was wrong. Humans are already so strong. He had been fighting the Ice Bear King for many years, thus he naturally knew how strong he was. The Ice Bear King's Ice Bear meteor had caused him massive problems before. However, it didn't have much effect after clashing with the humans' attacks. The Titan Snow Devil King agreed with Hui Yuhao that they shouldn't massacre the humans. The ice plains of the extreme north were a promised land that wasn't suitable for humans to live in. There wasn't any need to kill humans, they just needed to chase them away. Hui Yuhao nodded gently and said, "My plan wasn't perfect. That's why Little Bai was hurt." "Little Bai, how are you feeling now?" The Ice Bear King turned around and laid on the ground, allowing his burning wound to come into contact with the icy ground. He shook his head and replied, "I'm fine, I'm fine. I can still hold on. Grandpa, I don't blame you. You warned me, but I was overconfident. I wouldn't be in this state if I had tried to avoid their attacks. Atai is actually right, humans are scary. Although we had the absolute advantage earlier, we would still have needed to pay a huge price if we wanted to annihilate them completely." Hui Yuhao nodded and said, "This was why I decided to just teach them a lesson after our sudden attack before retreating. I'm grateful for all your help. Fortunately, there weren't many casualties this time." Atai nodded at Hui Yuhao and said, "You are the Snow Empress and the Ice Empress companion, and that means you will always be the extreme north's friend. If ever you need our help in the future, don't hesitate to send someone here to give us instructions." He bent down as he spoke, and passed his palm face up in front of Hui Yuhao. He was in human form, but he was still a lot more muscular than Hui Yuhao was. There was an icy blue snowflake on his broad palm, which seemed like it was made from ice and snow. However, Hui Yuhao realized to his surprise when he took it that the snowflake was actually lukewarm. But he could clearly feel that the terrifying aura of ultimate ice contained within it. This is the Snow Empress writ, and it's personally given by the Snow Empress. If you need anything in the future, just send someone to the extreme north with that Snow Empress writ, and we will follow any instruction or request you have. Thank you. Hui Yuhao didn't decline his offer, and he put the Snow Empress writ in his storage soul tool. The extreme north's strength was very formidable. Furthermore, the extreme north bordered both the Heavenly Soul and the Doling Empire's northern territories. Perhaps he would actually need their help in the future. The Titan Snow Devil King stood up straight. "We have completed our task, and we shall take our leave. Please send my regards to the Snow Empress. Atai." Blue light glowed as the Snow Empress glimmered beside Hui Yuhao. The Snow Devil King hurriedly bowed to greet her as she appeared, and the Ice Bear King made his posture a little more glamorous. The Snow Empress stared at the Snow Devil King seriously and said, "I'll lead the extreme north to you, Atai. I'll give you this, with this, you will be able to survive one more breakthrough." The Snow Empress waved her hand as she spoke, and a ray of blue light flew towards the Snow Devil King. The Snow Devil King caught it subconsciously, and his eyes changed drastically in the next moment. He knelt down in front of the Snow Emperor with a kaplunk, and his eyes were covered with mist. "Thank you, Snow Empress. I will forever remember your favor of lengthening my life." He kowtowed 3 times at the Snow Empress respectfully before he got back on his feet and strode away with his tribe of Titan Snow Devils. Hui Yuhao naturally knew what the Snow Empress had given him, but he had no intention of stopping her. He knew that the Snow Empress was helping him establish camaraderie. His connection with the extreme north would be seamlessly intimate with this relationship. The Ice Bear King side-eyed the Titan Snow Devil King enviously and grunted as he muttered under his breath, "What are you so happy about? I'll have my own in the future." The Snow Empress glanced back at him and said, "You shall follow Yuhao for now. Take these few days to treat your wounds, and we will depart when you're better." The second part of her sentence was targeted at Hui Yuhao, and she disappeared into his body after that. The Ice Bear King nodded obediently as his plump frame plopped back down onto the snow. The snow's temperature was so low that normal people would lose their lives lying down on such a surface, but the Ice Bear King seemed like he was enjoying himself. Hui Yuhao turned around and gazed at the Sun Moon Empire's camp in the distance, and a faint smile gradually appeared on his face. "I was defeated the last time around, Ju Zi, but I have pulled one back this time. I hope you understand what I'm trying to tell you, and leave this place as quickly as possible. He wasn't worried that the lesson he had given her wasn't sufficient. So many bases and structures had been destroyed, and no matter how reluctant Juzi was, she couldn't reconstruct everything and continue excavating within such a short period of time. In the end, it wasn't easy for her to transport all those structural installations in the first place. The cost of excavation was also exorbitant, and she probably couldn't put the same batch together within 2 months. Hua Yuhao did consider taking some of those rare metals back, but this place was so cold, and doing so would be a terribly difficult task. His individual strength was limited after all. He also considered asking the Titan Snow Devils to help, but the Titan Snow Devil King was only here because of the Snow Emperor's favor, and he couldn't just command the new ruler of the extreme north. He gave up thoughts of this endeavor. After this lesson, the Sun Moon Empire would have to think long and hard if they wanted to try to excavate the rare metals here again. Hua Yuhao could do a lot more during this period of time, and he would have time to relay this information to the Academy. The Academy would contact the Heavenly Soul and Do Ling Empires, and they were bound to do something. Hua Yuhao told the Ice Bear King to continue treating his wounds here while he snuck back towards the Sun Moon Empire's camp to scout it out. Hua Yuhao had a lot less trouble without the aerial surveillance soul tools. He didn't have to worry about anything at all with his concealment abilities. Hua Yuhao gazed down from a distance, and he could how wretched the Sun Moon Empire's camp was. The sky was already bright by now, and the Sun Moon Empire's army was clearly hard at work. They were collecting and salvaging their broken and damaged machines, and they seemed like they were taking apart their camp at the same time. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Hua Yuhao's mouth. Are they finally going to leave? Damaged machines weren't the most painful losses, as machines could be replenished and repaired. However, many of their tents had been destroyed, and that meant many soldiers no longer had shelter or a place to rest. That was fatal in a chilly place like the extreme north. Since Juzi could command her soldiers with strict obedience, then she had to have a relatively good reputation and prestige within her army, so she couldn't just disregard these soldiers. Furthermore, she still had to consider that he would notify the Do Ling Empire. Retreating was her only choice under such circumstances. As for those minerals and whatnot that the army had already excavated, he would just let them take them away. He could no longer do anything to stop them. After all, they hadn't managed to excavate much. Indeed, after a morning of readjustment, the Fire Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion put away many of their damaged or destroyed soul tools. They were damaged, but the rare metals inside them were still very precious. They could still use those rare metals after repairing or recycling them, so they couldn't just waste those soul tools. Midday passed, and the army had their meals before they moved out and proceeded towards the south, back into the Heavenly Soul Empire's territory. The Fire Phoenix Legion was positioned at the rear. Hua Yuhao watched them slowly leave, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of loss and lament in his heart. He was finally standing on opposite sides from Juzi in the end. How could he face her again in the future under such circumstances? Hi, I hope we don't meet again on the battlefield. But since she's one of the Sun Moon Empire's marshals, can we really avoid meeting each other on the battlefield again? Hua Yuhao was still doubtful in his mind when he suddenly noticed that a sphere of red light emerged in the barren army camp. The fiery red light was flickering very faintly, but it was very glaring amidst the white and snowy ground. Eh? Hua Yuhao was too far away, so he couldn't see clearly even with his spirit eyes and purple demon eyes. He had to activate his Eye of Destiny as he swept across to that area. He quickly discovered that someone was standing in the snow, and this red light came from her body. Wasn't that Juzi? In this moment, Juzi's pretty pale face flowed with grief and dismal beauty, and she was staring in his direction. She's waiting for me? She guessed that I would come here to scout. Hua Yuhao felt his heart quiver as he heaved a sigh, and he finally flew in Juzi's direction. Juzi could see him flying towards her from some distance away, and the sadness in her expression gradually receded. A slight smile appeared on her lips, and she thought to herself that her archenemy did have a conscience after all. Hua Yuhao drifted to the ground about 5 meters away from Juzi. They stared into each other's eyes, and their expressions were both deep and complicated. You've won, this time. Juzi grunted softly. She was evidently a little upset. Hui Yuhao heaved a sigh and said, "Actually, I don't want to win. If only we weren't standing on opposite sides." "Then stand over on my side," Juzi retorted furiously. "If you come to me, we will no longer be standing on opposite sides, no." Hui Yuhao grew silent. He paused for a moment before he said slowly, "We have our own wishes and creeds. I know that if you insist on continuing down this path, you cannot convince me. Can't you see that I haven't attempted to convince you? Aren't you afraid that I've prepared a trap here?" Juzi suddenly said coldly, "Have you forgotten what I said to you that day? Your heart is too soft. There's a saying that the compassionate cannot hold military authority. If I had been in your shoes last night, I would have unleashed a massacre when I had the absolute advantage. I would have done as much as I could to weaken my enemy's strength, and best if I could do away with myself, the mastermind. That would have been the only way to get something done once and for all. But you didn't do so, and you still dare to come see me at such a close distance. Aren't you afraid that I have prepared another ambush? You can't have the same luck to avoid capture every time, and when I'm prepared, it's impossible for you to capture me. At least, you can't do so within a short period of time." Hui Yuhao laughed coolly. "But I have never considered you as my enemy." Hui Yuhao's simple sentence dissolved Juzi's fierce expression, and she just stared at him blankly. "I have never considered you as my enemy." This was such a simple sentence, but it flicked at Juzi's heartstrings forcefully. The fury on her face disappeared, and a plain smile took its place. She heaved a faint sigh as she muttered to herself, "You live up to your name as the man that I have chosen. No matter how foolish you are still foolishly cute. But we can only be opponents in the end. You've won this time, but you may not the next time. I hope that we will cross paths again as late as possible because I truly don't want you as my opponent. That's not because you are hard to deal with, but because I can't bring myself to do anything to you. You may leave." Hui Yuhao stared at her quietly and said, "Can this really not be changed, Juzi?" Juzi shook her head and answered, "No." Hui Yuhao no longer tried to advise her. He knew that she had made up her mind a long time ago, and he only asked his question was because he was still hanging onto a fine thread of hope. Part 2 Episode 132